joined now by my good friend. He bailed on us. No longer loves us. He is Dan Mathews of 790 in Houston. Back home, I get it, you're back home.
Right.
But it's no fun. Like, all my friends are at 680. Now I go in there for like a pregame party for the Braves, and I'm like, where the hell's Dan?
Yeah, I mean, I still love you. I mean, you know, the love is.
There are others that you don't.
The love is not lost. No, I mean, it was a great time in Atlanta, but like you said, the dinner bell rang and I had to come home.
Houston's okay, but now we're in Dallas.
Yeah, well,
I like Houston better than Dallas.
Yeah, no, I mean, you know, Houston's great. It's got a wide amount of talent in Houston. But no, it's a great place, and yeah, you know, a lot of SEC coaches like to come through Houston.
So, the Texas Longhorns are here today. If you talk to media members around here, it seems like they've been here for the last 3 days because Texas people love talking about Texas.
Of course, yeah.
So, I guess first things first, how do you think that the attitude that exists among the fan base and within the administration impacts the SEC? Like, how will that play? Because you've been around the SEC.
Sure.
You know, you've been there for Atlanta for what, 6, 7 years, 8 years?
Yeah.
So you know all about this. But how do you think that mindset is gonna play?
Well, I think it's going to work twofold. I think number one with Texas, they more than Oklahoma, I feel like don't really understand what they're signing up for fan-wise, because you know as well as anybody, I know as well as anybody, that this isn't just a September through January thing.
No.
This is September until the next September. And the SEC is on Twitter at all times. It's on social media at all times. The memes are always there. And the trash talking is always there. So I think there's that. But I think it's also, too, you've known as well as anybody from covering the sport for a long time that Texas loves Texas. And
Very much so.
Yes. So,
very much so.
You know, they feel like in Austin that, you know, I mean, their whole tagline is as arrogant as can be. What starts here changes the world. So, you know, I mean, that's
it
just,
really doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, but in Austin they feel like it does, and all throughout the state they feel like it does. You know, you know, they feel like they're the New York Yankees, they're the New England Patriots, they are the Boston Celtics, the Lakers. I mean, that's the way that they feel about themselves. So it's also, too, not lost on me. I mean, Nick Saban had the line that there's a lot of arrogance in the SEC, and he's not wrong. I mean,
a little bit.
Yeah,
a little bit.
There's arrogance in Tuscaloosa. There's arrogance in Baton Rouge.
In Tuscaloosa?
Yeah, I mean,
way.
there's arrogance in Athens and in Knoxville. I mean, of, you know, feeling like not only are we part of this, but we're also part of the schools that can win this thing. So, you know, we're walking out there very proud and feeling like we've got something to work with here.
Do they have something to work with? Because to me, I look at Texas and I'm like, that's a team that can win a national championship. And that's not really going out on a limb because they were, 15 yards from going to a national championship game last year. So, but to me, I'm buying Texas in terms of, okay, yes, they can compete this year. They're going to be able to compete every single year. Are they going to be Alabama from the 2010s? No. Are they going to be Georgia right now? I don't know. Probably not. But they can, with this landscape, it can be Georgia, Texas, Alabama, and whoever else pops on a pretty consistent basis.
Well, I mean, they've definitely got the talent. I don't think there's any doubt about that, either through what they've signed out of high school or what they've garnered through the transfer portal. There's no doubt about that. But the question that I have, I think, is twofold for Texas. Number one, why do you necessarily feel like the success from last year is going to translate when you've lost so many players? You lost basically your entire wide receiver room, and I get it. They went out and got Isaiah Bond. They went out and got Amari Niblack. You know, you got some good players in the transfer portal. That's not lost on me. But you got to replace Jordan Whittington. You got to replace Xavier Worthy. You got to replace A.D. Mitchell. You got to replace J.T. Sanders. I mean, that's 4 names that I've given you right there, and I hadn't even talked about Byron Murphy and also Devondre Sweat on the defensive line.
And that's where you need to win, be like 9 deep in the SEC.
No, 1,000%. And, you know, and I think the second part of that question is you won 11 games last year, or 12 games, obviously, with winning the Big 12, but, you know, you get my point there. Aside from really the Big 12 championship and maybe the Alabama game, they barely got out of there with a win against Kansas State.
Yeah, well, Kansas State was good.
I get it, but
except at quarter, my Will Howard hate is
right. But I mean, I get it. But I mean, the point is like credit for winning those games. But you also had to sweat out a lot of those games. I mean, you had to get out of Fort Worth against a TCU team, which honestly, here's the thing too. I've been known as, if this is possible, both a Texas and Texas A&M hater.
Oh, I get that.
That's good to have, I guess.
I'm an Alabama and Auburn hater.
Right.
Freaking went
there
to
you
Auburn.
go. Well, you're also a huge Georgia homer, as we know from Twitter. So, but I mean, that can't be underscored. I mean, because there's a lot of these games that they're going to have that you're going to go on the road to a place that's tougher to win at than TCU.
Yeah.
You're going to have a back-to-back of Oklahoma and Texas there in the middle of October. That's not going to be easy.
Yeah.
So, just to think that, this is going to be an immediate transition and, tell us how great Texas is. The burden of proof's on you because we've seen.
Go show me.
Absolutely. I mean, we've seen Georgia be able to lose talent and be able to come back and be just as good, maybe even better. We saw it for years with Nick Saban in Alabama. Now we're going to have to try to see what happens with Alabama under Kalen DeBoer.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of the same deal with Texas. We've seen plenty of one-hit wonders. I mean, you brought up LSU. Yeah, I mean, I'm an LSU guy, but the last 2 times they've won national championships, it's been a precipitous drop-off the following
You trying to
year.
say Ed Orgeron could not sustain success?
No, I mean, I guess Les Miles, too, So, I mean...
Les Miles.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's...
Get me started on that, dude.
That's part of it with Texas.
So everyone's talking about Quinn. We had Carson Beck yesterday. I had a great interview with Carson Beck. Mm-hmm. The audio and video did not work.
Hey,
still good conversation.
Welcome to SEC Media
Right,
Days.
still good conversation. Can't upload anything either, but that's a different problem. Conversation, Carson Beck and Quinn Ewers, they're one at A and one B, and I mean they're throwing Dylan Gabriel in the Heisman conversation, but I mean whatever.
Sure.
Quinn, to me, has that mindset of IDGAF, like I'm just going to go out there and do my thing.
Right.
I'm just going to play ball. Yeah, he knows he's the front-facing player on the team. He's a quarterback, whatever. But he just wants to go out there and ball. To me, that makes it much easier to sustain success. Because Steve's never been in this position either. Sarkisian's never been in a situation where he has to sustain success.
Right.
Having a quarterback like Quinn, to me, makes it much easier because he's essentially doing Sark's job for him to an extent.
No, I mean, and look, it's the old saying, and you try to avoid all the cliches that are in sports, but sometimes it's impossible. The quarterback
taking it one game at a time.
Right? Yeah, there you go. It's a
Focus
huge.
On the process.
It's a huge game because it's the next game. God, let me tell you this before I get to my point. Whenever a player or a coach says that, I hope you lose that week.
But here's the thing:
it's the worst.
Before we get
sidetracked, thing in the world.
But it's actually true.
Oh my God!
It's actually true. It is true, Dan. Come on.
Stop it. I mean,
it is.
No, it's ridiculous. I mean, it's you're trying to tell me, playing against Louisiana Monroe is as huge as playing against...
For college kids, no. For NFL players, sure.
Okay, well, I mean, that's valid. I get that, but I mean, but that's the case with Quinn. I mean, the good news with him, he's got Kelvin Banks Jr. back. And for everything that I just talked about with the offensive line, here's where I get you back, Texas fans. You've got 4 out of the 5 starters back. And I just mentioned Banks Jr. That's huge. He's going to be a huge NFL draft pick.
Not one first round pick,
right,
I think, without a doubt.
Yeah, I mean, it could be the first offensive tackle taken in next year's draft.
Yeah,
you've got that working for you. But the other part of it as well, and here's a huge but, can he stay healthy?
Yeah.
I mean, because what do we know about Quinn Ewers? Both years, he's had some sort of injury that's knocked him out for either in his first year an extended period of time or last year a couple of games. But, people wondering, is Arch Manning going to play this year? I'd say the chances are pretty high.
Yeah.
Because unless Quinn can stay on the field, who's next in line? It's Arch.
Yeah. Speaking of Arch, I feel like we have to get him in for search engine optimization purposes. Like you put Arch Manning in anything and it's just...
Yeah. I mean, he's the new age Jacob Eason. I mean, where Georgia fans thought for sure, once Jacob Eason gets here, all of our quarterback troubles
Johnny
are
Manziel
gone.
too.
Right, absolutely.
Johnny Manziel has breakfast.
But you know as well as anybody that there's 2 things that are really good to be as a quarterback. Number 1, highly rated. And number 2, never have taken a meaningful snap.
That is very helpful.
Once you take a meaningful snap, then it's completely, he didn't do this, he didn't do that. Yeah, he threw for 4 touchdowns, but he had those 2 incompletions. It's stuff like that that Arch is not going to be immune to. I mean, it's going to be finally to a point of, he's a Manning, but God, he sucks on the field. I mean, that is going to come out. We know how Twitter is.
Yes. The first incomplete pass.
The 3 most thankless jobs in sports are Major League Baseball manager, offensive coordinator, both in the NFL and in college, and also quarterback, because there's really nothing you can do that's right.
No, not a thing. I'm of the belief that he's just kind of okay, and if his name was Arch Smith, he'd be a guy.
Right.
A pretty good guy.
Yeah.
Probably a starter.
Yeah.
But
a little bit better than Bronny James, though.
Hey, now we're in search engine optimization.
There you go. See, that's why you brought me on.
Yes, exactly. Dan Mathews talks Bronny James, Arch Manning, and Johnny Manziel.
There you go. So, it clicks for days.
Okay, so ultimately, where are you picking Texas?
I mean, I understand that they're the hot pick to get to Atlanta this year, but I think Ole Miss is really good. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't think LSU is getting enough credit.
I don't either.
I think LSU is
and the schedule's helpful.
No, absolutely it is. And I mean, I've seen some people, and look, it's not a shot, but I'll just give a shout out. My guy Mike Bratton from that SEC podcast, saying that LSU is a bottom of the league team. I don't see it. I see a team that's
ridiculous.
I understand that, kind of like I talked about the deficiencies on the defensive line with Texas. I understand LSU lost some really good players there.
They've also got 14 starting offensive linemen back.
Kyron Lacey is really good. I mean, Mason Taylor is really good. From all reports, Garrett Nussmeier is a really good quarterback.
And their defense can't be worse.
No, absolutely. And see, that's the one right there. And Brian Kelly, people kind of were like, oh, wait a minute. Your defense kept you out of the college football playoff last year? Yeah. Because
100%
without that defense, they win at Ole Miss. They probably beat Alabama last year.
Yes.
And
100% they beat Alabama
if you actually have a capable defensive scheme and good defensive backs, which Corey Raymond's back in Baton Rouge for that very reason, then you might win that Florida State game as well. Yep. So, I mean, no, it's 100% true that LSU got screwed by their defense last year. And look, for some of the games that they won last year, kind of like I was talking about with Texas, you've got to have those games that you're like, man, we were lucky to get out of there with one.
And it's going to happen.
No, absolutely. And they had some of those too. But no, I think that probably if I had to pick them, I would pick them. I'll split the difference. I'll say third. I'll put them third.
You want to know where I have them?
Where do you have them?
Undefeated, going to Atlanta, losing a rematch with Georgia.
Okay, there you go. I'll tell you what. Somebody brought up the point last night.
Was it John Neighbors?
It might have been John Neighbors. It might have been, but somebody brought up the point that they could play 3 times next year.
They could.
That's nuts.
And it's very reasonable. Dan, appreciate it.
You're the
How
best,
can people
buddy.
get your stuff?
I'm sorry?
How can people get your stuff?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Dan Mathews HOU. That's 1 T in Matthews, at Dan Mathews HOU. Sports Talk 790 is also another way that you can find us on Twitter, and part of the A-Team, 3 to 6, with Adam Clanton, Adam Wexler, coming to you every day, drive time in Houston. So that's how you can find me.
He's Dan Mathews.